Dear students, welcome to this lecture. Today's topic for discussion is Peace and Conflict Studies in Universities. The main objectives of today's lecture are to know the historical context for the development of peace and conflict studies as a discipline, to know the aims and objectives of the discipline of peace and conflict studies, to know the contribution of the peace and conflict studies, to understand the emergence of peace and conflict studies in the universities, and finally, to the present status of peace and conflict studies in the universities and colleges worldwide. Dear students, academics and students in the world's oldest universities have long been motivated by an interest in peace. As far as the development of the field of peace studies is concerned, it was immediately after the American Civil War 1861 to 1865 that American students' interest in the field, which is now known as peace studies, first appeared in the form of campus clubs in the colleges of United States. Similar movements appeared in Sweden in the last years of the 19th century, as elsewhere soon after. However, these were student-originated discussion groups, not formal courses included in college curricula. The First World War was the turning point in Western attitude towards war. At the Peace of Paris 1919, where the leaders of France, United States and Britain met to decide the future of Europe, Woodrow Wilson proposed his famous 14 points for peacemaking. These include breaking up European empires into nation states and establishment of League of Nations. These moves intend to ensure peaceful future via the background to the number of developments in the emergence of peace and conflict studies as an academic discipline. After the World War II, the founding of the UN system provided a further stimulus for more rigorous approaches to peace and conflict studies to emerge. Many university courses in the schools of higher learning around the world began to develop, which touched upon the questions of peace, often in relation to war during the period. However, it was not until the late 1960s in the United States that student concerns about the Vietnam War forced ever more universities to offer courses about peace, whether in designated peace studies course or as a course within an already existing field. It was in the 1950s that the field of peace studies developed as a field to counter the science of war. The first known peace studies courses in higher education was offered at Swarthmore College in 1888. And the first undergraduate academic peace studies program was introduced in the year 1948 at the Manchester College in the United States. In 1959, Peace Research Institute Oslo was founded in Norway. In the same year, Lancaster Peace Research Center was also formed in the United Kingdom. Again, in 1959, Center for Research on Conflict Resolution was founded at the University of Michigan. All these efforts became foundational stones for the new academic field, peace studies, which blossomed during the 1960s. During Cold War period, peace and conflict studies focused on the immediate issues of arms race, disarmament, conflict, conflict theory, conflict resolution, dependency, and developmental issues. However, in the post-Cold War era. In order to meet the needs and challenges of contemporary times, peace and conflict studies further broadened its subject matter. It shifted its focus from international conflict towards more complex issues of non-traditional security, human security, political violence, non-state actors, environment, social justice, democratization, development, and terrorism, etc. Dear students, as a field of study, peace studies focuses on the analysis and prevention, de-escalation and solution of conflicts by primarily peaceful or non-violent means, thereby seeking victory for all parties involved in the conflict rather than a winner-take-all outcome. On the other hand, war studies or security studies focus on the factors leading to the victory or defeat in conflicts waged principally by violent means and to the increased or decreased security of one or more, but not all, parties involved. Since peace studies investigates the reason for and outcome of large and small scale conflicts, as well as preconditions for peace, the discipline is also known as peace and conflict studies. Dear students, peace and conflict studies allows one to examine the reasons for the prevention of wars as well as the nature of violence, including social oppression, discrimination, exploitation, and marginalization, or what John Galton and others call structural violence. Peace and conflict studies is accordingly an academic field that identifies and analyzes individual and collective violent and non-violent behavior, as well as structural mechanism underlying social, political, economic conflict in order to understand and transform those processes that might lead to a more peaceful world. It also addresses the effects of political, cultural, and social violences, the causes of violence, and what can be done to resolve conflicts peacefully. Dear students, the aims and objectives of peace and conflict studies can be discussed as: peace and conflict studies is multi or transdisciplinary, incorporating important theories and research findings from anthropology, political science, sociology, international relations, biology, zoology, ethics and philosophy, history, and aspects of contemporary neuroscience. Dear students, peace and conflict is also multi-level, since it examines interpersonal, that is inner peace, conflict as well as conflictual relations between individuals, neighbors, ethnic groups, organizations, states, and civilizations. Central to peace and conflict studies is a concern not with understanding the world but with changing it. Peace and conflict studies is both normative and analytical. As a normative field, peace and conflict studies often makes value judgments such as peace and non-violence is better than war and violence. But it makes these judgments both on the basis of ethical postulates, that is, humans should resolve conflicts as non-violently as possible, and on analytic descriptions, that is, most violent efforts to resolve conflicts in fact result to less social stability than non-violent means of conflict resolution. Dear students, Canadian peace scholar Conrad Brunk argues that explicit value commitment of peace studies to peace requires another value central to definition of peace studies, that violence is undesirable and where the same human goods can be achieved by them. Non-violent means are preferable to violent ones. Therefore, normative component of peace and conflict studies are no different from many other disciplines. Accordingly, what distinguishes peace and conflict studies from other fields are its subject matter. Peace, violence, conflict, and power, its interdisciplinary methodology, and its aims of identifying, testing, and implementing many different strategies for dealing with conflict situations. Peace and conflict studies is both pedagogical activity in which teachers and learners come together to understand roots of peace and conflict, and a research enterprise in which researchers propose rigorous theories and methods for formulating and testing about sources of conflict and institutionalization of lasting culture of peace. Peace and conflict studies is both theoretical and applied. Dear students, peace studies, writers Galtung, quote unquote, is about relationship repair on all levels. So, it is crucial that these programs include both theory and practice. It focuses more on non-violent approaches of conflict management rather than coercive approaches. It emphasizes values, morality, and justice to reform and transform existing structure in order to sustain peace. Peace and conflict studies is a method of inquiry and practice concerned with the understanding of causes of violence and conditions for peaceful society. Dear students, its primary aim is the creation of peace within and without and movement from war to peace. To conclude, David Dunn and Pedro Bernaldez states that as a whole objective of peace studies is to distill and spread the knowledge of peace research to wider community in order to better understand peace and conflict issues in different and varied forms with certain values within a particular process and try to influence policy making process successfully. Dear students, let us have a look on the contributions of peace and conflict studies in the field of academia. Scholars and others working in peace and conflict studies have made significant contribution to the policies of many non-governmental organizations, development agencies, international financial institutions, and UN system and human knowledge more generally. Specific scholarly contributions have been made to conflict resolution and citizen diplomacy, economic, social, and political development and reform, peacekeeping, mediation, early warning, prevention, state building, and peace building, and the causes of war and reasons for peace, among others. More recently, social scientists and other peace researchers, while still in part focusing on assessing historical trends in warfare and violence, have also increasingly analyzed the comparative efficacy or failure of violent and non-violent strategies and tactics of revolutionary and other movements of social and political change. This represents a shift in interest from conflict management approaches or a negative peace orientation to conflict resolution, peace building approaches aimed at positive peace. Dear students, Peace researchers also investigate, catalog, and analyze arms production, trade and disarmament, and their political and economic impact, comparing them with those of peace. Peace and conflict studies, scholars have advocated an emancipatory form of peace building based upon international responsibility to protect human security, local ownership, popular participation in democracy building process. Dear students, now let us have a look at peace and conflict studies programs in different universities. Every day, citizens, teachers, and students have long been motivated by an interest in peace. American students' interest in what is today considered as peace study first appeared in the form of campus clubs in US colleges in the years immediately following the Civil War. Similarly, movements appeared in Sweden at the end of the 19th century and elsewhere in Europe soon after. These were usually student-originated discussion groups, not formal courses included in college curricula. Because of its destructiveness, World War I was a turning point in which Western attitudes towards war. Just after the World War II, many university courses on peace and war were established. The first undergraduate academic program in peace studies in United States was created in 1948 at Manchester College, Indiana. However, it was not until the late 1960s in United States that the student and professional objection to the Vietnam War stimulated more universities to offer courses about peace, whether in an undergraduate or postgraduate degree programs or a course within such traditional majors such as political science and sociology. For example, Manhattan College, a Catholic college in New York City, began its peace studies program in 1968, while Colgate University started one in 1969. In England, the first school of peace studies was found at Bradford University in 1973. Like many others, Bradford's program defines peace not just as absence of large-scale conflict and violence known as negative peace, but also as a structural cooperation that fosters justice and freedom, also known as positive peace, based on human rights, equal access to education, and just social and political structure. In the 1970s, many North American universities offered courses about war in Vietnam. Many faculty members who created these programs were responding to the student demands to create courses that have relevance to their lives. Dear students, growth in peace studies programs accelerated during 1980s as the students and general public became increasingly concerned about prospects of nuclear war. Their concern about the fate of planet spurred the creation of host of new courses and programs aimed at promoting global survival. Key components of peace studies during this period include courses on violence and war, the nuclear arms race, and the threat of nuclear destruction. International conflict, alleged aggressive tendencies in human nature, disarmament, discrimination against minorities, group conflicts, non-violent action, defense policy, group dynamics, environmental damage, cultural integration, unequal distribution of wealth, women's role, and structural violence. With the dissolution of Soviet Union and the formal end of Cold War in 1991, the emphasis of peace studies courses at many North American colleges shifted somewhat from international politics to the domestic scene, emphasizing domestic, structural, and civil violence. In 1991, the United States Institute of Peace published Approaches to Peace, an intellectual map, which included the headings for the study of peace as traditional approaches, which included collective security and deterrence. International law approaches, which included international law, interstate organizations, and third-party dispute settlement. New approaches, including transnationalism, behavioral approaches, and conflict resolution. And political system approach, including internal system and systemic theories, world system, etc. By the mid-1990s, peace studies curricula in United States had somewhat shifted from research and teaching about negative peace to positive peace. Dear students, since the beginning of the new millennium, course offering in peace studies have expanded to include topics like North-South relations, development, debt, and global poverty, the environment, population growth, and resource scarcity, feminist perspectives on peace, militarism and political violence, and non-violent alternatives to terrorism. There is also increasing emphasis on conflict resolution and conflict transformation. Dear students, let us have a look on peace and conflict studies status today. Peace and conflict studies today is widely researched and taught in large and growing number of institutions. The number of universities offering peace and conflict study courses is hard to estimate. The International Peace Research Association website provides one of the most authoritative listing available. A 2008 article in the International Herald Tribune mentioned over 400 programs of teaching and research in peace and conflict studies. The Peace Research Institute, Oslo, the American University, the University of Notre Dame, George Mason University, Syracuse University, University of Bedford, UN-mandated Peace University, Lund and Uppsala Universities, the Universities of Queensland and Sydney, Innsbruck and Klagenfurt Universities, and the University of Oslo and Tromsø. Other notable programs can be found at the University of Waterloo, University of Hiroshima, King's College, University of London, London Metropolitan University, Sakarya University, Istanbul, Marburg University, Germany, Sciences Po, Paris, University of Amsterdam, Netherlands, University of Otago, New Zealand, St Andrews University, Scotland, University of Coventry, and York Chapman University, the Rotary Foundation, the John B. Kroc Foundation, the UN University support several international academic teaching and research programs. Of the several hundred North American colleges and universities with peace studies programs, about one half is in church-related schools. About a third are in large public universities such as University of California at Berkeley. Approximately 1/5 are in non-church related private colleges and a smaller number are in community colleges. About half of the church-related schools that have peace studies programs are Roman Catholic, other religious denominations with more than one college or university with a peace studies program are Mennonites, Quakers, United Church of Christ, and Church of Brethren. About 80% of these are the undergraduate level and the rest are at the graduate level. Only about 10% of these North American colleges and universities have both undergraduate and graduate programs under the auspices of Kroc Institute. University of Notre Dame offers number of doctoral programs in peace studies and related disciplines. Other institutions of higher education responding to the burgeoning interest in the field include the University for Peace, established by United Nations in demilitarized Costa Rica in 1980. Peace studies programs are noticeable by their absence in elite private universities, where departments of political science and government held sway along with programs in security and international studies. Dear students, peace and conflict studies programs and international security and diplomacy research agendas have also become common in the institutions located in conflict, post-conflict, and developing countries and regions. For example, the National Peace Council Sri Lanka, the Center for Human Rights University of Sarajevo, Bosnia, Chulalongkorn University, Thailand, National University of Taimur, University of Kabul, Afghanistan, Makere University, Uganda, Tel Aviv University, Israel, the University of Sierra Leone, Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi, Master's Program in Conflict, Peace and Development Studies, University of Tribhuvan, Nepal, Peace and Conflict Studies, National Defense University, Pakistan, Master's Program in Peace and Human Rights Development Studies, Bangladesh, University of Professionals, Gandhian Center for Peace and Conflict Studies, University of Jammu, and so on. Dear students, at present time, peace and conflict studies is somewhat shifting its focus from interstate rivalry to interstate conflict, as well as to the problems caused by interpersonal violence. Whereas peace studies faculty use to come mostly from international relations and political science. They now are drawn from many different fields, including social welfare and education, such conventional disciplines as psychology, philosophy, and sociology, and recently minted graduate degree program in peace and conflict itself. While the original emphasis of peace and conflict studies in the United States was on the occasion of war, today, the field of peace and conflict studies is addressing such hot button issues as intra-psychic and interpersonal conflicts as well as wars, terrorism, trafficking, refugees, treaties, climate change, and international efforts to curtail war and to promote an ecologically sustainable future. Additionally, many scholars in university campuses are trying to apply the insights of principled and strategic nonviolence to diverse settings. Dear students, this was all about today's lecture. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. Thank you.